They laughed the loudest on Veterans Day, when Mason, the bar counter guy, called the tattoo on Harold Grayson's arm a mark from a barroom brawl. At Rusty Spoon, in Willow Creek, Montana, morning sunlight slipped through fogged windows, casting beams on worn wooden tables. Harold, 74, once a Marine, now sat quietly, sipping cold coffee under the buzzing neon light, beside a cracked salt shaker. That faded tattoo, he didn't mean to show it off, but it remembered him. Remembered days of smoke and fire no one in the diner ever knew. In just a moment, the room would fall silent, shifting from mockery to reverence, as Harold's secret flared like a flame in a cold wind. The first time you see a small town change because of an old patch of ink, what do you think? Tell me, if you were sitting there, hearing the door's bell jingle and watching the past walk in, what would you do? All right, my dear audience, let's dive into a story that'll leave you speechless. Take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly connect with what I'm sharing here, and drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always thrilling to see someone joining us from all corners of the world. Harold Grayson pushed the weathered wooden door of Rusty Spoon. The brass bell above jingled sharply, cutting through the chilly morning air. Outside, golden brittle leaves swirled on the sidewalk, rustling as if whispering of days long gone. Inside, the scent of toasted bread, singed at the edges, mingled with smoky bacon, yet it couldn't warm the cold indifference of the atmosphere. Glances, fleeting and apathetic, slid over Harold, as if he were a faint shadow in Willow Creek's familiar tableau. He walked, his old shoes scuffing the wooden floor, each step heavy, carrying the weight of decades. His threadbare wool coat clung to his gaunt frame, and as he settled at his usual table by the window, pale sunlight pierced the glass, etching the deep wrinkles on his face. A map of a long, arduous journey. The tattoo on Harold's arm peeked out as he reached for the white porcelain cup. Numbers and letters, faded, like relics of a forgotten language, no longer sharp. They clung stubbornly to his skin, a vow that would never fade. Harold didn't look at them. His gaze drifted to the road blanketed in golden leaves, where trucks glided by, leaving faint trails of exhaust. Within him, a corner of memory stirred quietly. Endless nights under gunfire, screams, the acrid smell of gunpowder. But he locked them away, as he had done for thousands of mornings before. This diner, this table, this coffee cup, they were his sanctuary, where he could be ordinary, not a memory of war. At the counter, Mason, a young man with vibrant green hair and a smile sharp as a blade, nudged his friend beside him. His eyes sparkled with youthful curiosity, tinged with arrogance. "Check out the old man's tattoo," he whispered, his voice loud enough to pierce the sizzle of the frying pan. Probably a souvenir from a drunken night in Vegas, or a brawl in some parking lot. A chuckle erupted, spreading like a small flame, touching a few nearby patrons. A middle-aged man smirked. A young girl covered her mouth, but no one objected. Just a harmless joke, they thought. Mason, brimming with the confidence of someone untouched by loss, didn't see Harold's shoulders tremble slightly, didn't notice how he gripped the cup tightly, as if clutching a crumbling piece of peace. Harold didn't look up. He set the coffee cup down, the porcelain's soft clink like a breath. In his chest, a heartbeat pulsed slowly, steadily, as if his heart had learned to ignore invisible cuts. Those taunts weren't new. They came. They went, like the cold winds sweeping through Willow Creek each winter. Yet each time, they stirred a question he didn't want to answer. Did the world still remember what he'd left on the battlefield? Did anyone see, beneath the faded ink, the nights he held comrades through pain, the days he walked with blood-soaked boots? He took a sip of coffee, its bitterness flooding his tongue, and let his gaze drift far, where memories couldn't reach. Across the room, Jacob Hartley, a 15-year-old with tousled hair and bright eyes, sat quietly, his sketchbook open before him. Scribbled lines filled the pages, birds, buildings, imagined faces. But today, his fingers paused, the pencil hovering. Jacob squinted, staring intently at Harold's tattoo. It wasn't like the dragons or roses he'd seen online. Those numbers, those angular lines, they carried a weight, as if telling a story waiting to be heard. In Jacob's heart, a spark of curiosity ignited, not the fleeting kind of youth, but a deep yearning to understand, as if he sensed the pain hidden beneath that ink. He leaned forward, sunlight from the window bathing his face, highlighting eyes brimming with questions. Harold's tattoo wasn't just ink. It was a door, and Jacob, unknowingly, had placed his hand on the knob. Mason's laughter still hung in the air, but Jacob didn't hear it. He sketched, each pencil stroke slow, deliberate, as if touching a secret. Within him, a strange feeling stirred, a connection to the quiet man across the room, the one the town seemed to have forgotten. Harold, with his distant gaze, didn't know the boy was watching him. Not with mockery, but with a reverence yet to be named. Outside, golden leaves fell. Inside Rusty Spoon, a story waited to be told. Quietly, fiercely, like the pulse of a heart that never surrenders. Jacob Hartley couldn't tear his eyes away from the tattoo on Harold Grayson's arm. Faint numbers, angular lines carved in an ink that seemed to belong to another era, not like the fire-breathing dragons or crimson roses he'd scrolled past online. They carried a weight, a buried secret waiting for someone curious enough to unearth it. Jacob sat there, in the corner of Rusty Spoon, his sketchbook splayed open before him, fingers gripping the pencil tightly. In his chest, a strange spark of emotion ignited. Not fleeting amusement, but a yearning to touch a story bigger than himself. That tattoo, though faded, seemed to whisper. And Jacob, with the blazing eyes of a 15-year-old, listened. Lunch break came. Jacob didn't hesitate. He hopped onto his old bicycle, pedaling hard through Willow Creek's leaf-strewn streets. Cold wind slipped through his thin jacket, tousling his messy hair. His heart raced, not just from the pedaling, but from a fierce intuition. Harold's tattoo was no accident. It was a door, and he held the key. Willow Creek's public library emerged, a red brick building with fogged windows, as if guarding the town's secrets. Jacob pushed the door. Its hinges creaked, blending with the scent of old paper and polished wood. Inside, Mrs. Evelyn, the librarian with silver hair tied high, sorted books, her frail hands moving slowly but precisely. Her glasses slid down her nose, but her eyes remained sharp, as if she'd seen through thousands of stories. Jacob approached, his sketchbook trembling in his hands. He opened to the sketch, rough pencil lines recreating Harold's tattoo, the numbers, the angular strokes, drawn with the care of someone trying to understand. "Do you know what this is?" His voice was soft, but it carried a rare resolve. Mrs. Evelyn pushed her glasses up, leaning closer. Her eyes lit up, not with surprise, but with a memory stirred awake. She didn't speak at once. Her fingers brushed the page lightly, as if caressing a keepsake. In that moment, she was more than a librarian. She was a keeper of memories, a witness to this town's growth and the scars it bore. "This is the mock of the 3rd Marine Battalion," she said, her voice low, as if afraid to disturb the air. Jacob felt his heart skip. It wasn't just a tattoo. It was a vow. On Veterans Day morning, Rusty's spoon in Willow Creek glowed brighter than usual, as if the whole town had gathered to share warmth amid Montana's winter chill. Tiny red, white, blue flags, perched on muffins, lined the counter, trembling under soft golden light. Outside the door, a striped banner shimmered, swaying in the cold wind, a reminder of silent sacrifices. Harold Grayson sat in his familiar corner by the window, his steaming coffee cup clouding his weathered face with mist. He was quiet, his gaze drifting to the leaf-strewn road where trucks glided by, leaving faint trails of dust. In his chest, war memories stirred, smoke-filled nights at Quezon, screams drowned by artillery. But Harold kept them locked away, as he had for decades, his hand gently gripping the porcelain cup, as if clinging to a fragile piece of peace. At the counter, Mason, with green hair and a smile sharp as a blade, leaned back, a rag draped loosely over his shoulder. He, with the arrogance of youth, didn't see the weight in Harold's eyes. "Bet the old man got that tattoo after a bar fight," he said, his voice louder than needed, as if he wanted the whole diner to hear. A chuckle spread, like a small flame licking dry grass. A woman nearby covered her mouth. An old man smirked, but no one stopped it. To them, it was just a harmless joke, a moment to stir the air. Mason, confident in his untouched world, didn't see Harold's shoulders tremble slightly, didn't notice how he drew a slow breath, as if suppressing a wave within. Harold didn't look up. He sipped his coffee, its bitterness flooding his tongue, and let his gaze drift far, where taunts couldn't reach. But then, the diner door swung open, the brass bell jingling sharply, like a sudden cut. 5 former Marines stepped in, their steps steady as if the ground belonged to them. They wore black coats, campaign pins glinting under fluorescent lights, each pin a story, a scar, a vow. The leader, a veteran with gray hair and eyes like steel, paused when his gaze met Harold's. The diner fell silent, as if the air had been sucked dry. The sizzle of the frying pan, the murmurs of patrons, all stopped. Only the heartbeats of those watching pulsed faster. No one knew why. The veteran raised his hand in a salute, a slow, solemn gesture, as if facing a flag. "Sergeant Grayson, 3rd Battalion, Quezon," he said, his voice ringing like a church bell, piercing the stillness. The other 4 stood tall, lining up behind him, their eyes locked on Harold, unwavering. In that moment, they were not just aging men, they were warriors, carrying memories of fire and brotherhood. Harold sat there, his hand still cradling the coffee cup, but his eyes flickered with a faint light, not pride, but recognition, as if a buried part of him had just been named. Mason, behind the counter, dropped a spoon, the metal's clatter on the floor echoing like a confession. His face paled, his cocky smile vanished, replaced by confusion and a trace of regret. He looked at Harold, truly looked for the first time, and saw not just an old man, but one who'd walked through hell and returned. In Mason's heart, a strange feeling stirred, not shame, but an awakening, as if he'd just realized he stood before a mountain he hadn't known. The patrons around, who'd laughed with Mason, now lowered their heads, their eyes averted. A woman clutched her napkin tightly. An old man cleared his throat, as if to dispel the awkwardness. Harold gave a slight nod, a small gesture, but enough to answer. In his heart, a quiet wave rose, not for being recognized, but for the faces of old comrades, those who never came back, flashing vividly before him. He took a slow breath, letting the wave subside. Rusty Spoon, just seconds ago filled with careless laughter, now brimmed with wordless reverence. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the faded tattoo on Harold's arm as if igniting a forgotten story. No one spoke. No one needed to. But in that silence, a truth was etched deep. Harold Grayson was not just a regular. He was a hero, and this town, though late, finally saw. Dear audience, take a moment to relax. Maybe grab a glass of water and keep listening to this story. There's more surprising turns ahead. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see someone join us from all corners of the world. Comment 1 if you love this story, so we can keep bringing you more incredible tales. That afternoon, pale golden sunlight slipped through the windows of Rusty Spoon, casting faint streaks across the worn wooden floor. Jacob Hartley stepped inside, his sketchbook clutched tightly to his chest like a shield, each footfall soft but resolute. He paused before Harold Grayson's booth, his heart pounding, not from fear, but from a rising reverence, yet to be named. Jacob sat across from him, his hands gripping the table's edge, eyes blazing yet hesitant. He wanted to ask, to touch the story hidden behind the faded tattoo, but his tongue felt tied. His gaze said it all, a silent plea, not to sate curiosity, but to understand, to connect with a man the whole town had overlooked. Harold looked at him, his eyes deep, like a still lake hiding turbulent undercurrents. He turned away, his gaze drifting out the window, where trucks rolled down Willow Creek's main road, leaving faint dust trails in the air. Within him, war memories stirred, unbidden yet undeniable. Quezon's nights, the smell of gunpowder, the roar of artillery, they never left, only locked behind a shell of silence he'd built over decades. But Jacob's eyes, clear and earnest, were like a key, gently brushing the lock. Harold drew a slow breath, his gaunt hand trembling slightly on the cold coffee cup. April 68, Quezon, he began, his voice hoarse but steady, like a forgotten hymn. He spoke of Clara Vance, a petite battlefield nurse, her slender frame holding the strength of a mountain. Clara's smile, ever present even under fire, was like light piercing the night. She didn't just save dozens of soldiers with deft hands, stitching wounds under the flickering light of a medical tent. Clara sang Southern folk songs, her clear voice rising above the cannons, offering a moment of peace in hell. She wrote letters for soldiers too weak to hold a pen, her careful words a thread tying them to loved ones. In Harold's heart, Clara's image shone vividly, hair tied high, eyes bright, and a smile that never faltered, even as blood stained her hands. Then he paused, his eyes clouding, as if walking again through a smoke-filled field. One night, as shells fell like rain, Clara was hit by shrapnel. Harold found her, sprawled in the mud, blood soaking her uniform, her breaths faint like an autumn breeze. She still tried, with her last strength, to press a small silver ring cold in his palm. "For my sister," she whispered, her voice breaking, her eyes fading. Harold gripped the ring, as if seizing his own vow, but he never found Clara's sister. 50 years passed. The ring stayed in his coat pocket, a testament to an unkept promise, a scar unhealed in his heart. Harold pulled a small wooden box from his coat, its edges worn, opened with trembling fingers. Inside, the tarnished silver ring lay quietly, beside a photo of Clara, her radiant smile among comrades, as if time couldn't touch her. Jacob blinked rapidly, trying to hide a tear rolling down his cheek. He didn't cry from sadness, but from a profound awe, realizing Clara was more than a name. She was light. She was courage. She was the unsung heroes never etched on stone. In Jacob's heart, a fire blazed, not to tell a story, but to keep it alive forever. Harold gazed at the photo, his finger brushing its yellowed edge. He said no more, but his silence was heavy, as if embracing Clara and all the comrades gone. Jacob sat there, his sketchbook still closed, but his mind had carved every word. Clara's story wasn't just memory, it was a reminder that courage needs no glory, only a heart that shows up when needed. Outside the window, the afternoon light dimmed, but in Rusty Spoon, a quiet bond was born between an old man bearing war's scars and a boy carrying the dream to preserve them. Late that afternoon, golden-orange sunlight filtered through Rusty Spoon's windows, painting long streaks across the worn wooden floor. Hannah, the diner's owner, stood behind the counter. Her hands paused mid-wipe on a glass, her gaze locked on the moment the former Marines departed. She said nothing, but within her, a quiet wave surged. Not shock, but an awakening. She had seen it all. Mason's mocking laughter, the solemn silence when the veteran called Harold's name, and Harold's eyes, deep as if carrying an entire battlefield. In Hannah's heart, a crack opened. This diner, where she'd poured her sweat for 10 years, revealed a truth she'd never seen. It wasn't just a place for toast and coffee. It was where memories lived, where forgotten stories waited to be told. Hannah stood there, her eyes drifting over the crowded tables, where regulars sipped coffee and flipped through newspapers. But today, she didn't see familiar faces. She saw gaps, untold stories, scars hidden beneath old coats. She turned, stepping toward the bulletin board near the door, where faded flyers hung like relics of time. Her fingers touched a weathered sheet, a dance class from last year, its corners curled. Then a lost cat notice, its ink blurred by rain. She peeled them down, one by one, her movements slow but resolute, as if stripping away a veil hiding Willow Creek's heart. From a small office behind the counter, Hannah retrieved an old wooden box, dust thick on its lid. She opened it, the scent of aged paper and ink wafting up, like the breath of bygone days. Inside were black and white photos, neatly folded newspaper clippings, fragments of the town's veterans' memories. She chose Clara Vance's photo, her radiant smile beside comrades, eyes bright as if untouched by war. Then the article about Harold, the words, "Purple Heart," still sharp despite faded ink. Hannah pinned them to the board, each small tack a vow. Other photos followed, men and women in uniform, smiles and gazes carrying both sacrifice and pride. A wall of remembrance was born, unassuming, yet each image pulsed with history's heartbeat. Hannah stepped back, her hands trembling slightly. She took a small candle from the counter, lit it, and placed it beneath Clara's photo. Its flickering light, frail but steadfast, whispered of unsung heroes. In her heart, a new feeling stirred, not pride, but duty. Rusty Spoon, with its wooden tables and bacon-scented air, now held a different weight. It was a keeper of stories, a place where tales like Clara's and Harold's wouldn't be swept away by time's cold wind. At the counter's edge, Mason, who once mocked Harold, stood still. His cocky smile had vanished since morning, when the veteran's voice rang out. In his heart, a small storm swirled, regret, shame, and a trace of awe he couldn't name. He pulled a scrap of paper from the order pad, scribbling with a ballpoint pen. "I'm sorry." "Thank you, sir." His fingers shook as he slipped it under Harold's coffee cup, a stealthy but sincere act. Mason didn't look at him, but his heart felt lighter, as if he'd shed an invisible burden. He turned away, wiping the counter, his movements slower, as if learning to walk in a new world. No one mentioned the note. No one needed to. But everyone in Rusty Spoon felt the shift. Regulars, usually loud with town gossip, now sat straighter, their voices softer, as if afraid to disturb the air. An older man folded his newspaper, his eyes lingering on the memorial wall. A young girl paused her phone tapping, gazing at the flickering candle. The diner was no longer just a place for breakfast. It had become hallowed ground, where memories were honored, where people like Clara and Harold were seen. The afternoon light faded, but the candles still burned, and in that silence, Willow Creek began to remember, not just its heroes, but the kindness they left behind. The next morning, Jacob stepped into Rusty Spoon, his backpack slung over one shoulder, arms cradling a stack of papers. He placed it before Harold, a carefully typed manuscript, recounting Harold's and Clara's story, paired with a sketch of Harold's tattoo and a copy of Clara's photo. "I want people to remember," Jacob said, his voice trembling but resolute. Harold flipped through the pages, his eyes lingering on the sketch. He nodded, then tucked the document into his coat pocket right beside the box holding Clara's ring. "Keep writing, kid," he said. "Stories like these, they need someone to keep them alive." The diner now pulsed with a new rhythm. Hannah played an old record, the wordless strains of a marine hymn rising, gentle yet solemn. A middle-aged man, wearing a veteran's cap, entered, hesitating as if unsure he belonged. Jacob, standing near the door, smiled and held it wider. "Welcome back," he said. Harold rose, walked to the memorial wall, and lightly touched Clara's photo. He turned, nodded at the bell above the door, and left. But his story didn't end. It lived on. Through Jacob's words, through the memorial wall, through the small acts of kindness in a town that had learned to listen. And if you look closely, you'll see heroes never truly leave. They just wait for someone to ask the right question. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always thrilling to see someone join us from all corners of the world. Comment 1 if you love this story, so we can keep bringing you more incredible tales.